Good afternoon. I'm Ed Wolfe, your Kitsap County Commissioner from Central Kitsap. Welcome to my Commissioner's Corner. I'd like to point out to all of you at home that my guest today and I are at least 10 feet away from each other. If you look around, I'm taking my mask off. They will take their mask off if they choose. But we're relatively safe, or as safe as we possibly can be, I believe. If you're comfortable with your mask off, I'll move forward and just start a panel discussion on why small businesses are being impacted by COVID today, where we're going, job trends, where we're going, and how we're all going to get there together. And that's an important point for me, that we're all in this together. If I may, I'd like to start with Elizabeth, with you. Can you let the public know at home how we doing in Kitsap County with regard to unemployment, the rate here, and what sectors in Kitsap County have been hit the hardest? Three-part question. And where do you see us going in 2021?
Okay, I'd like to start for the viewers at home by having them really think back about their daily life and how they go about interacting with businesses. Mm-hmm. Because they're going to the grocery store, they're driving their vehicles, they may be taking a bus and so forth. And every time they do something, they may spend a little bit of money, or they may buy a new car. So because of the situation that we're in, people's social behavior is really changing, and that is the huge impact behind the change in the unemployment rate in the county. So if we look at last year in August, we had an unemployment rate of just over 4.5% in Kitsap County. This August, which is our most recent data, it's about 7.5%. Now that 7.5% is an improvement from the April rate, where we were up to 14%, April of 2020. And so there's no crystal ball. We do not know what the months are going to have ahead. But if we look back historically, the idea that the jobs will continue to come back, but it will not be that big increase between the 14% down to the 7%. It will be a much slower.
When will they start coming back?
Well, nationwide, we're still down about 9 million jobs because of the situation that we're in. When will they start coming back? Well, again, no crystal ball, but in my opinion, there will be a slow improvement, but it will not be a quick improvement. Yeah, and excuse me, if we look at statewide, we were up to about 16% unemployment in April, and then now we're at about 8.4% for the state of Washington. And if you look at the numbers, what that means, so in the state of Washington right now, in April, there were 300,000 people unemployed. That same period last year, it was only about 160. In Kitsap County, we're at about 10,000 people unemployed. That same period last year, in August of 2019, we were approximately 5,000 people.
Sorry, please.
Oh, well, then the industries. Certainly, if we break it out into industry and then occupation, we're looking at leisure and hospitality really being very strongly hurt. Certain smaller retails that don't have the bigger buffers. And then, of course, there's been the CARES Act funding that has provided some support. So that's industry-wise. Construction, surprisingly, has also been impacted more than a lot of people thought it would be. And then when you look at the jobs, again, associated with those industries, you're seeing the retail clerk sales and so forth. One area that has also been hit is the private sector education services. So the food service people, all the contract workers that worked for school districts, those have also been heavily impacted in our county.
Okay. Let's cut to the chase. When are we going to get back to whatever the new normal is with regard to jobs and going to work? And I say that because, as I mentioned earlier when I had my opening, that this is the first time I've been in the commissioner's chambers in 7 months. Are we going back to, and this will come to you in a minute, Monica, are we going to come back to some sense of normalcy?
So very, very briefly, I was talking to someone who's been in this area for many years, and we were talking about three main economic hits: the dot-com bubble, the 9/11, and the housing and financial crisis. And if you look at all of those, you saw changes that have become permanent in how we deal with each other, in how we deal with our economy. And so there's the social aspect and then the financial piece, the societal impact, of course, of those three things. And so what we're talking about is elements of all of three of those crises we will most likely see become permanent moving forward. What they're exactly going to be, we don't know. But looking back, we can kind of get some hints from what the new normal might look like.
Okay. Whatever new normal means. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Court. We may come back to you in just a minute, but let me transition over to Monica. Nice to see you again.
Yes.
You wrote an article that was in the Kitsap Sun recently.
Yes.
In your world, your workplace world, or your placement world. The article is workforce trends in coming in a COVID world.
Right.
Workforce trends in coming into a COVID world. What can you summarize the article and give us a little bit of information about what this means?
Sure. Really, what it means is that, like Elizabeth had talked about, previous significant events have impacted various different industries in our history, and this happens to be, from what I've seen, happens to be kind of that pandemic that's really going to hit HR and workforce, people management aspects, just like the 2008 downturn hit the financial industry, and out of that spurred a couple of different changes that happened. I think that there are going to be significant changes in the HR and people management world based on what is happening in our pandemic and how we are navigating and changing.
I'm going to ask you another question, but
Yeah.
I'm going to jump back to Elizabeth and ask you, many people that are probably watching this show are wondering, well, how do I go about getting a job? So tell us, what does Olympic Workforce Development do in terms of someone looking for employment?
So we work and partner very closely with all the WorkSource offices.
What's a
and
WorkSource office?
A WorkSource office is an American Job Center office. So just like any place you need to go get your boat registered or get a driver's license, there's the WorkSource office. And when I say you can go to the WorkSource office, right now, you cannot open the door, but all the services are available virtually. And you can go online, all the classes, all the instruction, all the support for job seekers is, as well as for businesses who are looking for people, is all being carried out virtually. It took, in March, it took us a couple of weeks to make that happen, but we did, and so that's great. So we're able to serve people, and we continue to serve people just remotely or via the phone.
Thank you. And you'd mentioned to me before in another session or at another time that jobs in distribution and logistics seem to be at the top of the feeding chain. Is that true? And what is that?
Well,
why are they up there?
So the logistics piece is really booming because of all of us who are tending to order a lot more online instead of going to the grocery store. And the logistics definition could also mean someone who's working at a grocery, who's getting things ready to deliver to someone who's driving by in their car. So all those times you're just, anytime you're moving a product from one place to another, which we're seeing more and more logistics jobs seem to be quite in demand at this time.
Of course, I asked that question because our son is in logistics and distribution for a government contractor in the DC area. And it just seems like it's a booming area for many of the reasons that you've suggested to us today. Let me go back to you, Monica.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a technical question, and I'm sure you're going to simplify it for me and simplify it, especially for me, maybe the audience. By the way, it was an excellent article you wrote.
Thank you.
For the times we're in today. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was the reason you wrote that article.
Yep,
but again, it's workforce trends coming in a COVID world.
Yes.
And they can find that on the Kitsap Sun webpage, I guess,
Yes,
somewhere.
you can.
If they have an interest. In that article, you describe the paradox of technology and
Humanity.
humanity. A paradox between, you're going to have to really explain this one, the paradox between technology and humanity, and the ability to remain human in a very high-tech world. I can relate to that because I'm in Zoom meetings 6 or 7 hours a day.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
can you explain, what does that mean?
It's really about tying together the efforts and the mechanisms of using technology in your job and how technology is impacting the way that businesses perform, tying that all back to kind of that human intrinsic value of mission driven. We all have this intrinsic value to want to help others and to do good of some sort. And so how do you sit on a Zoom call or multiple Zoom calls for an entire workday and, help an employee battle Zoom fatigue and the mental aspect of being disengaged from that human contact that is always puzzling.
That's why my question, you're partially answering that question. How have you seen businesses change in the past 7 months from the way they were reacting or the way they were interfacing with employees, with their customers, and the public at large?
Sure.
Are you seeing a lot of that today?
There's been quite a few businesses that have partnered in a lot of ways for each other. And so they do kind of cross-promotional aspects, and so they're supporting each other. Even just on social media, I've seen a lot of businesses really engage with other businesses to promote one another and band together. And that then also increases more of the client traffic, based on some of the things that I've seen. So having that ability to band together and allow a patron to support more than one business at a time just by one act of going out instead of 2 separate acts, that helps a lot. With respect to HR specifically, and how they are changing and how we work with our employees, there's tremendous growth there. Everybody was kind of pretty hard fast one way or another before this about work from home, and a lot of organizations were not quite as excited about trying it out. Well, they had to, right? and here we are, and some of them have really changed their minds. But being in people management, those leaders in those businesses really have become more open-minded and creative in trying to assist their employees while making sure they make what they need to on the profitable side or the production side of the business, in order so that everybody can keep talking or keep working. And so there's been a lot of flexibility with that, a lot of childcare issues that people have worked around.
That's a whole nother topic.
I know. Mental health issues with employees, especially those who are working from home.
There's not a day that goes by, at least for the fellow commissioners and myself, that we don't hear, when we're talking about workplace and employers and employees, we don't hear about, well, what about childcare? And of course, the county now is providing not childcare, but assistance in tutoring.
I saw that.
And the kids, our kids at home. We're transferring that also to other school districts. So you're going to be reading something in the public, and the 3 of you, hopefully within the next week, about how this program of providing services to those that are home, the kids that are home, to parents, you're going to see that going to Central Kitsap. You're going to see that going throughout the county. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Let me move over to Doug Washburn. As I said, looking at your resume, we should give you a raise. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
I'm actually a volunteer.
Yeah, no. Well, you actually work evenings and you work weekends, because I get emails from you, or I've seen you out doing things that have happened in our county that I don't even want to talk about today, in terms of homelessness and quarantine and isolation centers. And Doug, I really appreciate you and what you have been doing for a long time here. How long have you been here? 7 years?
Yes, 7 years.
7 years. Came from the state?
Yep, came from DSHS at the state.
What were you doing in DSHS?
I was the office chief over at DSHS, which was distributing, making sure that funding gets out from the federal government through the Medicaid program statewide.
Well, that's a whole nother,
Yeah.
whole nother topic. Talk about CARES funding and funding coming in, as we talked about this morning during one of our briefings.
And, and it's been my honor to be in this position because I've always lived in Kitsap. Even when I worked in Olympia or Seattle, I always stayed stationed here. My wife and kids always lived here. So, I mean, it's genuinely.
Rodeo queen.
Rodeo
Not your
queen.
wife, your daughter.
My daughter, yeah.
Wasn't
so,
she a rodeo queen?
Yeah, just last year. So,
sure,
yeah, it's been a genuine honor to be able to have this position.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're much appreciated by everyone that I work with here. What are the changes that you've seen during the last 7 months in terms of how we serve our communities in need in Kitsap County?
So what we do is we work with, human services is different than human resources. What we do is we work with any populations that need assistance, that need a little hand up, that are having a hard time, coping with things. Could be behavioral health issues, aging and long-term care issues. Anything to do with those sorts of things is what we work with. What we've noticed differently during COVID quite a bit is, as Monica and Elizabeth both said, businesses have had to react. That's true for nonprofit businesses too. They've had to react. And the work they're doing it's life and death, a lot of the work. Food banks couldn't just say, oh my gosh, we'll close down. Like you said, we haven't been here for 7 months. We'll close down for 7 months and come back when it's safe. They don't have that option. So what they did is they turned on a dime and came up with ways to keep their staff safe, their volunteers safe, and their clients safe to make sure that people could still get those food bank services. Mental health agencies and chemical dependency agencies switched. The governor, when he actually made it an official emergency statewide, they switched to telemed services, which means that you don't have to show up for an appointment face to face. You have the option of being over the computer online.
It's the new norm.
It's
For
the
all
new
of
norm
us.
now, and
For
it's
all of
safer
us.
for people.
Yeah.
Some people like it, some people don't, but at least people can get their appointments. You can have your chemical dependency appointment, you can have your mental health appointment, your medical appointment. So those providers did really well too. And that's what some of the CARES funding you've worked with, I'm sure we'll get into that later, has been helpful to help people so they could get that technology they needed, and the citizens could get the technology they needed to be able to participate in that. So that's some changes we've seen. Also, just with the agencies we work with, we have over 550 contracts and amendments a year with agencies that we work with out there. They've really been hit hard with their volunteers because if you look at the average volunteers, which there's thousands, literally thousands and thousands in Kitsap, a significant percentage of that is in what we consider high-risk groups, people that are over the age of 65. So they've also had to retool how they work with that too, which they've done very, very well. But they've also had to bring in some additional paid staff too, which has cost them some money. So those are some of the main shifts we've seen during COVID. And we found that people are, like Monica said, some people were resistant to going to online services. We don't have a choice now. How do you do it? People can go to our website. It's Kitsap County Human Services. As you look it up, it'll pop up. And there's all the resources that people can get online. They don't have to come into the office.
How do I want to put this question? I'd like to talk about CARES funding in your world, if you're prepared to do that. I know the county, to date, we've distributed CARES funding probably about $16 million. Part of that's going to public health tools, so actually it'd be more than that, 20 million. What in your world of human services, funding comes to you from the state or the feds, or to the county, to you. What is there enough coming in? Is it coming in regularly? Is there a problem with the funding in terms of, I'm addressing this to you because we know we have to spend X amount of money by November, December, or we lose it. It's like your leave, earn it, whatever that is, use it or lose it. What are we doing about that? And how is the funding working in your world for those that really need it?
The funding works in our world that we're coordinating different funding streams.
Kitsap Community Resources I was trying to get to, yeah.
Yeah, for example, we have HUD funding, Housing and Urban Development funding. That goes a little bit beyond December. Most of our CARES funding, that big chunk you mentioned, is going to end. We have to have everything done by November 30th of this year.
Unless we get an extension, which we're pushing for with our Senate and House delegation in D.C.
And if we don't get an extension, we're really worried about what we're going to do, especially for elderly people experiencing homelessness out in the community. What are we going to do after that? Because we've been spending a significant amount of that CARES funding on those groups, on food supplies, local food supplies for the community. It has been enough up till now, but we really do need an extension or an additional CARES funding package to move forward. Because there's still people, from Elizabeth's report, I mean, there's still people hurting out there. They're trying to get jobs, but they just need that little boost up to get some food, to get some unemployment support.
Hand up, not hand out.
That's right, and a huge portion of what we do is on rental and mortgage assistance for people. If people see this, go to our website, it's on there, contact Kitsap Community Resources.
What's the website?
Kitsap County Human Services. Just enter that into your browser and you'll find it right away really easily. And landlords can go there. If people haven't paid their rent, they can contact Kitsap Community Resources too. We're strongly encouraging people, don't be embarrassed, don't be shy about it. If you've had a hard time due to COVID, that's not your fault. Contact your landlord, work with them. Contact Kitsap Community Resources, work with them. If you've been turned down before years ago for a program, you think I'm not eligible, a family of four it's 80% of the median income of the area. So a family of four can make over $70,000 and still be eligible for these rental and mortgage programs to help them with that. And that will pay your rent for 3 months, that alone. And that, and we're trying to, that'll help people from becoming homeless.
Would you tell the public at home what the county's involvement is, your involvement, the county's involvement in quarantine and isolation centers?
Yes. So
part of the funding we were just talking about.
Part of the funding we just talked about. So we get some of the CARES funding. We also get Washington State Department of Commerce funding for that. And what that was to set up for people that aren't able to safely quarantine or isolate at home, the quarantine and isolation centers are for people like that. They can go out there. We have one on the south end now that's activated. We have another one in the county if we need to have it. We have about 80 beds available. They can go out there and stay. All their meals are provided to them. Peninsula Community Health is out there to provide their medical appointments. Everything they need is right there on site, so they can go out there, stay there for their 2 weeks. They get tested.
And I might add, I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting, but we need volunteers from the public for our community isolation and quarantine. And in fact, Commissioner Gelder volunteers at one of the isolation centers.
He's out there a lot.
The training and all of the PPEs and everything's provided. We do need volunteers, correct?
Yeah, we need volunteers always out there. Yeah. And it's a good service for the community. You can go out there. It's free for everyone that needs to go out there. It's free. We're trying to reach out to different populations in the county, especially the marginalized populations, because if you look at the data, like the Latino population is only 8% of the county-wide population, and then when you see they're between 20 to 40% of the people that are infected with COVID, we haven't done a good job getting that message out. So we want to get that message out to all groups that are out in the county. Okay. It's for everyone and it's free.
So I'm not going to do a closing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to tell me what have you seen that's come out of COVID that's good, that's positive. As many of us have said before, or some of us have said before, we're in this together. We're going to get out of this together. And by the way, we're Kitsap. We're going to do this. So let me start with Doug. Doug, have you seen positive things that have come out of COVID in Kitsap County?
We have. We've seen tremendous positives, and it's, for the human services perspective anyway, it kind of all centers around pulling together as a community. And I want to give a shout out to the volunteers and the not-for-profit agencies again, because they have all risen to the occasion. I mean, it's phenomenal what they've done. Behavioral health-wise, you seem to hear only about doom and gloom, but there's also something known as post-traumatic growth too. It's not just
post-traumatic growth?
Post-traumatic growth.
This is real.
This is real. This is where people, you find out about yourself, in quarantine and isolation, you spend more time with your kids. I know people all want their kids to go back to school now, and that would be probably good when they're ready for that. But there's also a growth that can take place too, so it isn't all doom and gloom. We were worried about suicidal ideation and suicides. That we saw that trending up in April and June. The last 2 times that we've tracked that, which is the last 2 sections that the Washington State Department of Health tracks at, it was actually lower than it was at 2019 levels.
Wow.
So that's it. It's not all doom and gloom. If you need help, call in. It's there for you. Go to our website, like I said, and there's suicide prevention and relief lines, and there's all sort of mental health lines there. Your employers have it through your employee assistance programs. There's nothing wrong with that. If you need help, it's out there, but we're going to be fine. We'll get through it, and we are going to be fine. And if you need help, reach out for it because it's there.
The one and only Doug Washburn, Director of HR. And I hang on after we finish our presentations and check out all of the websites that will be listed if you have any interest in contacting or following up on any of the points that you've heard today. Please stick around for an extra 30 seconds and get a web page that maybe could lead you to some assistance if that's what you desire. Elizabeth.
You know, from an economic standpoint, which is where I'm, focused so often on workforce, I look back in our history and I look at what's happening today, and I'm just so confident that Americans will continue to be innovative and resilient. Some of the things you talked about how businesses are coming up with new ideas, they're trying new things, they're really looking forward to making things better. And so all those types of things that are happening now, I have such faith in the American people and the residents of Kitsap County and all of us working together. I feel that strength every day. So that's the good thing that's come out of this, in my opinion.
It would be hard to top that if you were going to say something else. That was right on point. Thank you, Elizabeth. Monica, you have the closing word.
The closing word. Wow. Okay. Well, one of the things that I think is good out of this situation is the amount of grace that we're starting to give people and that we're experiencing and receiving from one another through all of this. And from the HR standpoint, you think about a year ago when somebody was trying to do a Zoom interview for a job and the horrified look on their face when their child would pop in, right? And how that would all be made fun of and whatnot. But today,
I'm going to interrupt you. On a Zoom this morning, a child didn't pop through on, I'm not going to tell you who it was because you know this person, but I saw two cats walk across their desk as we're trying to pay attention and be serious about millions of dollars being distributed. What's that cat doing up there?
Exactly. It's that kind of thing. It's the grace that we're allowing each other, and a little bit of the humor aspect of it too is really important. And kind of going along with that, I have 40 or 50 jobs that I could fill today if people wanted to apply. And so jobs are out there, even though we're in the middle of this pandemic, and there's a lot of talk about how organizations are tightening down and not quite sure what they're going to do, but the jobs are there. So reach out.
Good news. I mean, this is good news. Well, I'm going to prepare for departure here. And thank you all for being here. I'll just close by saying we are Kitsap. We'll get through this together. And it's been an informative learning experience for me today, and I hope the public, I'm sure they have appreciated what you said. And come back and see us next time on Commissioner's Corner.
Thank you.